The USA and USSR, bitter rivals, Cold War enemies, and the ultimate ideological showdown. But were they always like this? Did these two superpowers always hate each other, or was there a time when they were actually friends? Well, kind of. Let's dive in. Before the Soviet Union even existed, the USA and the Russian Empire actually got along pretty well. They weren't best buddies, but they had no reason to fight. In fact, during the American Civil War, Russia even sent warships to US ports as a show of support for the Union. Talk about an unexpected friendship. But things took a dramatic turn in 1917 when the Russian Revolution kicked the Tsar to the curb and replaced him with a communist government. Suddenly, America's old trading partner was preaching global revolution, and the US was not a fan. President Woodrow Wilson wasn't thrilled about Russia's new leadership, but he also didn't want the country to fall apart completely. So in 1919, he invited both sides of the ongoing Russian Civil War to the Paris Peace Conference. The problem? The anti-communist white forces had no real power to negotiate, while the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, basically laughed at the invitation. They called the whole thing an imperialist charade, and figured the capitalist world would collapse soon enough anyway. The US mostly stayed out of the Russian Civil War, but it did send a few troops to Siberia, not to fight the Bolsheviks, but to keep an eye on Japan, which had its own plans for the region. This didn't exactly warm relations with Moscow, but once the war ended in 1922 and Lenin was in charge, the US and USSR mostly ignored each other. A major issue was money, specifically the millions of dollars American investors had poured into Russia, which the new Soviet government promptly confiscated without any plans to pay back. Recognizing the USSR would mean accepting that this money was gone forever, so for over a decade, the US refused to acknowledge the Soviet government. Meanwhile, the Soviets saw the US as the ultimate capitalist enemy, but they were still focused on consolidating power at home. By the 1930s, however, things started to shift. Most European countries had already recognized the USSR, and the Great Depression had made economic opportunities more attractive than old grudges. So in 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt made a deal with Stalin. The US would recognize the Soviet Union, and in return, the USSR would promise to respect religious freedoms, expand trade, and stay out of American politics. A great deal for the US, right? Well, not really, because Stalin had no intention of keeping those promises. Still, the two countries remained wary of each other. Trade was minimal, trust was non-existent, and ideological differences ran deep. But in 1941, everything changed when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, invading the Soviet Union. Suddenly, the US and USSR found themselves on the same side. The US provided critical supplies through the Lend-Lease program, but while they both wanted to defeat Nazi Germany, they had very different ideas about what the post-war world should look like. Many American leaders hoped the war would leave the Soviet Union too weak to be a future threat. But that's not how things played out. The USSR came out of World War II stronger than ever, and as soon as the war ended, tensions between the two nations skyrocketed. The seeds of the Cold War had already been planted, and the uneasy alliance quickly turned into outright hostility. So, did the US and USSR always hate each other? Not exactly. There were moments of cooperation, but the fundamental ideological clash between capitalism and communism made friendship nearly impossible. Even before the Cold War officially started, the two nations were always destined to be rivals, whether they admitted it or not.